Most people don't lose money because they're careless. They lose it because they're living by financial rules that quietly expired. Habits that once made sense. Services that once delivered real value. Systems built for a slower world, before instant access. Before on-demand everything. Before information became free. Over time, these outdated patterns turn into invisible leaks. Not dramatic mistakes, not reckless spending. Just small recurring payments that feel normal. But stacked together, they quietly reduce flexibility and force people to work harder just to stay in the same place. Take traditional TV. For decades, cable was the easiest way to access entertainment, news and sports in one bundle. It solved a real problem. But today that convenience has faded. Prices climbed, channels multiplied, and customization never truly arrived. Many households still pay, not because they love it, but because it's familiar, bundled or simply unquestioned. Meanwhile, platforms like Netflix and YouTube reshaped how content is consumed. On-demand access, personalized recommendations, and the ability to choose exactly what to watch have changed the equation. You pay for what you use when you use it. The monthly savings may seem small, but over years, that difference compounds into meaningful financial breathing room. The same shift is visible with smartphones. A decade ago, upgrading every 2 years felt normal. Now, people are holding onto devices longer. Not because innovation stopped, but because the urgency to replace them did. The real lesson? Progress doesn't just come from earning more. It comes from questioning what no longer deserves your money. There's been a subtle but important shift in how people view upgrades, especially with smartphones. That shift reflects a quiet realization. Yearly improvements no longer justify yearly spending. New devices may be faster on paper, cameras slightly sharper, and screens a bit brighter, but for most users, the daily experience barely changes. What has changed, however, is the price. Flagship models from companies like Apple and Samsung now regularly exceed $1,000, transforming a practical tool into a recurring luxury expense. Smarter alternatives already exist. Buying a model 1 or 2 generations older often delivers nearly identical performance at a much lower cost. Refurbished devices, especially those backed by warranties, narrow the gap even further. In many cases, something as simple as replacing the battery extends a phone's life more effectively than any new feature ever could. As innovation slows, value shifts from novelty to longevity. Keeping a device longer isn't falling behind. It's extracting full value from what you already paid for. The same principle applies to daily coffee purchases. Coffee itself isn't the issue. Automation is. Spending $5 or $6 a day feels harmless, so it goes unquestioned. But daily habits compound into fixed expenses. Often you're not just buying coffee, you're buying convenience and avoiding small moments of preparation. Making quality coffee at home, with good beans and a simple routine, can match or exceed cafe quality. Occasional visits then become intentional treats, not unconscious expenses. Coffee becomes powerful again when it's a conscious choice, not a subscription disguised as a daily habit. The savings may feel small in the moment, but over time they create room for investments that actually grow. Gym memberships follow a similar pattern. They usually begin with strong motivation. Paying the monthly fee feels like committing to a healthier future. But weeks pass, schedules fill up, and attendance slowly drops. The payment, however, continues. Many people don't cancel, not because they're using the gym, but because canceling feels like admitting failure or giving up on the version of themselves they imagined. So the charge repeats quietly in the background while nothing changes. The issue isn't fitness. It's the disconnect between spending and action. Better options exist because consistency matters more than access to equipment. Home workouts eliminate the biggest barrier, getting there. Bodyweight exercises, minimal equipment, and free online training resources cover most fitness needs. For those who prefer structure, pay-per-visit gyms or flexible plans align cost with actual attendance. Even outdoor training can replace machines that rarely get used. This shift changes the relationship between money and behavior. You invest when you show up. That alignment removes waste, reduces guilt, and grounds fitness in habits instead of contracts. And the same principle applies elsewhere. Buying books feels productive. It signals growth. But real value isn't in purchasing knowledge. It's in using it. Book collections often grow faster than understanding. During moments of motivation, buying a new title feels like progress. A signal of discipline, curiosity, and ambition. But too often those books sit untouched. The purchase represents who we hope to become, not what we realistically have time to absorb. Money gets spent on intention, while execution quietly lags behind. The smarter shift isn't to stop learning, it's to reduce friction between interest and follow-through. Libraries provide massive collections at no cost. Digital books remove physical clutter and make reading more immediate. Audiobooks transform commutes, walks, and routine tasks into learning time. These alternatives work better because they align access with action. Knowledge only compounds when it's applied. Ownership means little without engagement. The same pattern shows up with paid news subscriptions. In the past, paying for news made sense because information was limited and slow to travel. Today, scarcity has been replaced by overload. Many people subscribe to premium outlets with good intentions, but end up skimming headlines or reading summaries of stories repeated across platforms. What they're often buying is the feeling of being informed, not deeper understanding. More efficient options exist. Free newsletters curate essential updates. Podcasts and long-form discussions provide richer context than brief articles. Public sources and aggregators deliver core information without recurring fees. When you filter information intentionally, attention improves. You spend less, consume more thoughtfully, and gain clearer insight without funding. Subscriptions that operate more as identity badges than useful tools.
This is where everything finally connects. Dependence was never about weakness, and it was never about poor choices. It was about design. A system that runs best when you're predictable will always favor structures that reduce choice, narrow flexibility, and keep you engaged. That doesn't make the system evil. It makes it efficient. The problem is what happens when efficiency replaces awareness, when convenience replaces understanding, when continuity replaces consent. That's how people end up relying on systems they never consciously chose, following rules they were never told existed, and feeling pressure they can't quite explain. And here's the part that matters most. You don't break dependence by fighting the system. You weaken it by becoming intentional inside it. You slow what doesn't need speed. You question what demands urgency. You protect margin wherever you can find it. Not to escape, not to rebel, but to regain agency. Because the opposite of dependence isn't isolation. It's choice. Choice to pause. Choice to say no. Choice to redesign small parts of your financial life without needing permission. The system expects compliance. It expects automation. It expects you to keep going. What it doesn't expect is someone who understands how dependence is built and chooses differently, quietly. That's why real change doesn't look dramatic. It looks calm. It looks boring. It looks invisible from the outside. But internally, it feels like space returning. And space is powerful, because systems that rely on dependence struggle with people who operate with awareness. So here's the question I want to leave you with. If dependence was designed into the system and not into you, what's one small area of your financial life where you could replace default behavior with conscious choice? Think about that. Because the moment you start choosing intentionally, you're no longer just inside the system. You're interacting with it on your terms. And that's where real freedom actually begins.